The silent invasion. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Alliance Command Center had never been so quiet. Admiral Zental stood motionless, his translucent skin dimmed to a pale gray as the holographic display showed the unthinkable. Outpost Zenith. Their most fortified defensive position in the Orion Arm had fallen to the Swarm Collective. "Casualties?" he finally asked, his melodic voice barely audible. "Total," replied Strategic Officer Mira, her forearms moving rapidly across control panels. "No survivors detected." Around the circular command center, 24 Alliance officers from a dozen different species watched in horror as the recording continued. The swarm ships, organic, asymmetrical, and seemingly countless, methodically reduced Zenith's defenses to atoms. The station's shields, considered impenetrable just days ago, collapsed like tissue paper against the swarm's biological weapons. "That's the 5th outpost in 14 cycles," Science Director Krell said, his crystalline exoskeleton crackling with distress. "Their adaptation rate shouldn't be this advanced. We've miscalculated." Admiral Zental touched a control crystal, freezing the image on a Swarm Leviathan-class bioship. Unlike the elegant geometric designs of Alliance vessels, swarm ships were organic horrors, living weapons that evolved with each encounter. "Not their adaptation rate," Zental said quietly. "Their determination. We expected them to retreat. When faced with sufficient resistance to reconsider when casualties mounted, they haven't. They simply continue." The Galactic Alliance had stood as a beacon of civilization for over 8,000 standard years, comprising 17 sentient species across 112 star systems. They had cultivated peace through technological fitness and scientific advancement. Their quantum networks allowed instant communication across vast distances. Their energy systems drew power from subspace itself. Their medical science had all but eliminated death from natural causes, yet none of that mattered against an enemy that viewed mercy as weakness. "The Council is requesting your assessment and recommendation, Admiral," Communications Specialist Trill said, her voice trembling slightly. Zental closed his 4 eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on his consciousness. The Alliance way had always been to seek understanding, to find common ground, to elevate through knowledge. But the Swarm had rebuffed every diplomatic overture with brutal efficiency. "Tell them," he hesitated, knowing his next words would shatter millennia of tradition. "Tell them we cannot negotiate with the Swarm. We cannot deter them. We must prepare for total war." A collective ripple of shock passed through the command center. War, not defense, not containment, was almost heretical to Alliance philosophy. "Our offensive capabilities are insufficient," Strategic Officer Mira noted, displaying tactical projections. "Even if we redirect all resources to military applications, simulations give us less than a 12% chance of victory." "What about the other members who haven't committed forces yet?" asked Krell. "The Seruvan Confederation has made it clear they view this as a regional conflict," Zental interrupted. "The Haidari Exchange has offered resources but no ships." The command center fell silent again. The Alliance, for all its advancement, stood alone against extinction. "There is one possibility," said an unexpected voice. All eyes turned to Elder Vin, the Alliance's historical advisor. The ancient Talaxian rarely spoke during tactical meetings, his role being primarily ceremonial in modern times. In the historical archives, there are references to a species from an uncharted sector, a species that, according to records, evolved, not through cooperation like the Alliance races or through biological imperatives like the Swarm, but through conflict. Conflict? Krell's crystalline structure flickered with confusion. What species evolves through conflict? One that faced extinction-level challenges repeatedly throughout its development, Vin replied. One that turned adversity into advantage through randomness and unpredictability. They're called humans. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar, yet somehow ominous. "I've never heard of this species in any contemporary database," said Mira, skeptically. "Because they haven't achieved full interstellar civilization, at least not by our definition," Vin explained. "Our long-range scans detected primitive warp signatures from their system nearly 40 cycles ago, but the Council deemed them too volatile for contact." Zental's eyes widened. "Too volatile? We've made contact with over 50 developing species." "These were different," Vin said carefully. "Initial observations suggested they spent more resources on weaponry than any species we've encountered. They appeared to be constantly at war with their environment, with each other. The Council decided to quarantine their system until they either destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their violent tendencies." A stunned silence followed this revelation. "You're suggesting we seek help from a quarantined primitive species?" Mira asked incredulously. "How would they even reach us?" Elder Vin's aged face showed the hint of a smile. "Who said they were primitive? Technologically, perhaps, but their advancement has been unconventional. And as for reaching us..." He turned to Zental. "Admiral, do you recall the unexplained energy signature detected near the Lysathian Nebula 2 cycles ago?" Zental nodded slowly. "An anomalous warp signature. We assumed it was a natural phenomenon." "It wasn't," Vin said. "I believe it was them, exploring, testing the boundaries of their capabilities." "Even if we could contact them," Krell interjected, "why would they help us?" "Because," Vin replied, "if historical accounts are accurate, there's one thing humans cannot resist: a fight where the odds are stacked against them." Admiral Zental stared at the frozen image of the swarm Leviathan. The Alliance had reached the pinnacle of civilization, art, science, philosophy. They had created wonders that would last until the stars burned out, but they had forgotten something essential along the way: how to survive when faced with an enemy that wanted nothing but their annihilation. "Specialist Trill," he said finally, "prepare a directed quantum transmission to the coordinates Elder Vin provides. Send all relevant data on the swarm, our tactical situation, and a request for military assistance. This goes against every protocol established by the Council," Mira warned. "The Council asked for my recommendation to ensure our survival," Zental replied, his voice finding new strength. "This is it. We need warriors, and it seems we've been avoiding the most proficient ones in the galaxy." 72 hours later, as the Alliance flagship Eternal Vigilance maintained a defensive position near the Lyra outpost, alarms suddenly blared across the ship. "Unknown vessel emerging from warp," announced the sensor operator. "Configuration. It's like nothing in our database." On the main view screen, space itself seemed to tear open, not with the elegant shimmer of Alliance warp technology, but with a violent, thunderous breach. Through this rupture emerged a ship that defied Alliance aesthetic sensibilities. Where Alliance vessels were elegant and geometric in design, this ship was asymmetrical and bristling with what were unmistakably weapon systems. Its hull bore scorch marks and what appeared to be hasty repairs, giving it the appearance of a predator scarred from countless battles. "Dimensions indicate a mid-range vessel," reported Mira, "but power readings, impossible. How are they, containing that much energy in such a primitive shell?" Before anyone could respond, a communication request pinged through their systems, not through the standard quantum channels, but through crude electromagnetic waves. "They're using radio, frequency communications," Trill said with disbelief. "I haven't seen this technology outside of historical archives." "Accept the transmission," ordered Admiral Zental. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of the alien vessel. Collective gasps echoed through the command center as the Alliance officers beheld humans for the first time. They were bipedal, like many species, but their appearance was jarring. No bioluminescence, no exoskeletons, no morphic adaptations. just solid, compact bodies that suggested density and strength. Their skin varied in shade but lacked the ethereal quality of advanced species. Their eyes, small, intensely focused, darted around with predatory awareness. At the center stood what appeared to be their commander, a figure of medium height with tanned skin and dark hair pulled back tightly. A jagged scar ran from temple to jaw on the left side of their face. "This is Commander Ilara Voss of the Earth vessel Nemesis," the figure announced in a steady voice. "We received your distress call. Understand you've got a pest problem that needs exterminating." Admiral Zental blinked slowly, trying to process both the crude translation and the casual approach to what was, for the Alliance, an apocalyptic crisis. "I am Admiral Zental of the Galactic Alliance flagship Eternal Vigilance," he replied with practiced diplomatic poise. "Thank you for responding to our transmission. We face an existential threat from the Swarm Collective." "Yeah, we reviewed your data packet," Commander Voss interrupted, causing several Alliance officers to flinch at the breach of protocol. "Nasty customers, these swarm types. Attack without provocation, no interest in negotiation, consume everything in their path." She shrugged. "We've dealt with worse." Zental exchanged glances with his officers, unsure if the translation was accurate. Dealt with worse than the most devastating force the Alliance had encountered in 8,000 cycles? "Commander Voss," he continued carefully, "perhaps we should establish a formal diplomatic channel to discuss potential collaboration." A harsh sound burst from the human. A laugh, Zental realized, though it contained little warmth. "With respect, Admiral, diplomacy seems to have failed you already. But sure, let's talk. I'll bring a shuttle over to your fancy ship in 30 minutes. Voss out." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the command center in shocked silence. "They're sending a physical delegation?" Krell asked incredulously. "Not a virtual presence?" "Apparently so," replied Zental, still processing the encounter. "Prepare a reception area in the diplomatic suite and alert security, but ensure they understand these are potential allies." As the preparations began, Elder Vin approached Admiral Zental privately. "You seem troubled beyond the obvious, Admiral." Zental nodded slowly. "That vessel, the Nemesis, it's a warship designed for a single purpose." "Yes," agreed Vin. "That's why we contacted them." "No, you don't understand," Zental said, his voice hushed. "Our scans indicate it carries enough firepower to challenge a swarm cruiser. If a mid-range vessel of their fleet possesses such capacity, you're wondering what their actual military capability might be," Vin finished his thought, "and what it means for the balance of power in this sector if they succeed against the swarm. We may be replacing one threat with another," Zental added. Elder Vin's expression grew solemn. "The historical records about humans are incomplete, but one thing was consistent. They are creatures of contradiction, capable of tremendous violence, yes, but also of surprising compassion. They fight fiercely for causes they believe in, especially when protecting others." "Let's hope those records are accurate," Zental replied, watching as the small angular shuttle launched from the Nemesis and began its approach toward the Eternal Vigilance. "Because we're about to invite predators into our midst and pray they hunt only our enemies." The human factor, the diplomatic suite of the Eternal Vigilance, had hosted delegates from hundreds of worlds across the Alliance. Its design reflected the Alliance philosophy of harmony. Flowing lines, soothing colors that shifted subtly according to the emotional resonance in the room, and ambient music composed of mathematical patterns found in celestial bodies. None of that seemed to impress Commander Ilara Voss and her delegation. The humans moved through the space with an alertness that bordered on paranoia. Their eyes constantly scanned, bodies positioned to maintain clear lines of sight to exits. While Alliance members naturally drifted in graceful arcs when walking, humans moved with purpose, direct lines, efficient turns. Impressive ship you've got, Commander Voss remarked, though her tone suggested clinical assessment rather than admiration. Must be what, 7 kilometers long? 8.2, Admiral Zental corrected. The Eternal Vigilance serves as both our primary diplomatic vessel and central command for this sector. Voss nodded, running a hand along a nearby wall panel that rippled with soft light at her touch. Beautiful. Not very practical from a combat perspective, though. Too many windows, for one thing. The transparencies are reinforced quantum glass, Science Director Krell explained. Stronger than any conventional material. Still a structural weakness, replied Lieutenant Rivera, Voss's second-in-command. Unlike her commander's gruff demeanor, Rivera spoke with precision, her eyes constantly calculating. Any material can fail under sufficient stress. The Alliance delegation exchanged troubled glances. This was not how first contact scenarios typically unfolded. Perhaps we should review the tactical situation, suggested Strategic Officer Mira, guiding them toward the central holographic display. As the three-dimensional map of Alliance territory materialized, 112 star systems rendered in glowing blue with red markers indicating swarm incursions, Commander Voss's demeanor shifted. The casual assessment disappeared, replaced by intense focus. She circled the display slowly, occasionally murmuring to Rivera, who made notes on a primitive-looking handheld device. You've lost 26 outposts in 6 months, Voss observed. Always the same pattern. They hit hard, overwhelm defenses quickly, consume everything, and move on to the next target. Correct, confirmed Mira. Our predictive models indicate they're systematically working their way toward our core worlds. At current progression, they'll reach Alliance Prime within 45 days. Voss exchanged a meaningful look with Rivera. Resource-driven expansion with a side of genocide. Classic move. We've seen it before. From whom? Asked Admiral Zental, surprised. Ourselves, historically speaking, Voss replied matter-of-factly. Before we unified, old Earth history isn't pretty. Before Zental could process this disturbing revelation, Commander Voss reached into the holographic display, her hands disrupting the perfect blue light. Show me your fleet positions. Reluctantly, Mira added this classified information to the display. Dozens of blue markers appeared representing Alliance vessels distributed across their territory. You've got your fleet spread too thin, Voss said immediately. Defensive posture around key installations. That's why you're losing. Our strategic doctrine prioritizes protecting civilian populations, Zental explained. Admirable, but it's getting you killed, Voss countered. The swarm has the initiative. They choose when and where to hit while you're reactive, always a step behind. She turned to face Admiral Zental directly. You need to punch them in the throat, hard. Make them reconsider the cost of this campaign. We've attempted counterstrikes, Mira objected. Our vessels were outmatched. Because you attacked like Alliance members, Rivera interjected. Predictable formations, conventional approaches, adherence to tactical doctrines the swarm has already analyzed and countered. Voss nodded. We need to show them something they haven't seen before. Something unpredictable, irrational by their standards. A smile spread across her face, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp in the soft light of the diplomatic suite. Something human. Within hours, Commander Voss had outlined a strategy so unorthodox that several Alliance officers questioned whether the translation was functioning correctly. Rather than engaging the swarm in traditional space combat, Voss proposed using the Lysathian Nebula's natural properties, electromagnetic distortion, radioactive dust clouds, and unpredictable plasma discharges as weapons. Your ships have exceptional shields, she explained, designed to withstand energy-based attacks. But they're calibrated for directed energy, not the chaotic patterns of a nebula. We'll force the swarm to follow us in, then hit them while their systems are compromised. This plan violates every principle of our tactical doctrine, Mira protested. Exactly, Voss replied with a predatory grin. That's why it might actually work. As preparations continued, Science Director Krell found himself observing the humans with growing fascination. While most of the Alliance crew maintained a polite distance, he approached Lieutenant Rivera during a rare, quiet moment. "May I ask you something, Lieutenant?" Rivera looked up from her work. "Of course. Your species, the historical records we have suggest you evolved in an unusually hostile environment. Is that accurate?" Rivera considered this. "Earth isn't particularly hostile by universal standards, but we evolved as both predator and prey. That shapes a species' psychology." "How so?" Krell asked, genuinely curious. "Alliance races evolved from primarily cooperative species. Your entire biology is optimized for cooperation, perception, processing complex information." Rivera gestured to Krell's crystalline structure. "Even your communication is multidimensional." Krell nodded. "While humans evolved as persistence predators," Rivera said matter-of-factly. "Not the strongest or fastest, but the most relentless. We would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. That requires certain psychological traits: determination, adaptability, aggression when necessary. And these traits manifest in your approach to warfare," Krell suggested. "Among other things," Rivera agreed. "But there's more to it. During our history, humans faced repeated extinction-level threats: ice ages, pandemics, resource depletion, our own weapons. Each crisis acted as an evolutionary filter, selecting for resilience, creativity under pressure, and yes, sometimes ruthlessness. Yet you developed advanced technology, art, culture," Krell observed. Rivera smiled slightly. "Those aren't contradictions, Director. They're complementary. The same drive that makes us dangerous, our restlessness, our dissatisfaction with limitations, also pushes us to create, explore, improve." Their conversation was interrupted by alarms. On the main view screen, sensors showed a swarm patrol changing course, moving toward the nebula where the Alliance Human Joint Force had deployed. "They've taken the bait," announced Mira, surprise evident in her voice. "Of course they have," Voss said confidently, entering the command center with Admiral Zental. "Predators can't resist wounded prey. Time to remind them what it feels like to be hunted instead." The next 8 hours unfolded in a manner that would later be studied in Alliance military academies for generations. The Eternal Vigilance, alongside the Nemesis and 3 Alliance combat vessels, executed Commander Voss's unorthodox strategy with remarkable effectiveness. Hidden within the nebula's chaotic embrace, the Allied ships used precisely calculated maneuvers to herd the swarm bioships deeper into the radiation field. The swarm, their organic sensors compromised by the nebula's interference, found their biological targeting systems increasingly unreliable. When they attempted to withdraw, the Nemesis demonstrated capabilities that stunned even the Alliance officers who had begun to appreciate human ingenuity. The human vessel accelerated at rates that should have crushed its structural integrity, executing turns that defied conventional physics. Its weapons, primitive by Alliance standards in design but devastating in application, fired not at the swarm ships directly, but at specific points in the nebula, triggering cascading reactions that battered the enemy vessels with radiation, waves, and plasma surges. "How are they withstanding those gravitational forces?" Krell whispered to Admiral Zental as they watched the Nemesis perform yet another impossible maneuver. "Inertial dampeners," replied Lieutenant Rivera, who had remained aboard the Eternal Vigilance as liaison. "Crude by your standards, but effective. And our crew is physiologically conditioned to withstand extreme conditions." "Even so," Krell persisted, "the human body has limits." Rivera's expression grew solemn. "Commander Voss and her bridge crew will spend days in medical recovery after this. They know that. They accepted it when they took the mission. This casual mention of self-sacrifice for tactical advantage sent a chill through the Alliance command center. When the battle concluded 3 hours later, 2 swarm Leviathans had been destroyed and a third severely damaged. The Nemesis showed signs of battle damage but remained operational. The Alliance vessels under Commander Voss's guidance had sustained only minor damage. As the Allied fleet regrouped outside the nebula, the mood aboard the Eternal Vigilance was one of cautious optimism. First time the swarm has been dealt a significant defeat in this sector, Mira noted, reviewing the battle data. The tactics employed were unorthodox but undeniably effective. This is just the beginning, Admiral Zental replied, his gaze fixed on the Nemesis through the view screen. Commander Voss has requested a direct meeting with the Alliance Council. She says Earth is prepared to commit significant forces to counter the swarm threat. In exchange for what? Asked Krell, voicing the concern many felt. That, Zental said quietly, is the question that keeps me awake. When Commander Voss returned to the Eternal Vigilance 12 hours later, the changes were evident. Her movements were stiffer, her face drawn with exhaustion beneath a mask of professional composure. Medical scans would later reveal multiple microfractures in her skeletal structure, internal bleeding, and neurochemical imbalances consistent with extreme stress, all consequences of the maneuvers she had executed during battle. None of these injuries were mentioned as she strode into the command center and offered a formal nod to Admiral Zental. One victory doesn't win a war, she said without preamble, but it changes the psychology of it. The swarm thought they were the apex predator in this sector. Now, they know different. We've analyzed the battle data, Mira reported. The swarm will adapt their tactics for future engagements. So will we, Voss replied. But more importantly, I've received authorization from Earth Command. The 107th Echo Battalion has been mobilized. Our elite shock troops are en route to this sector. Estimated arrival, 72 hours. The announcement sent ripples of both hope and anxiety through the command center. Your civilization committed those resources based on a single distress. Call, Zental asked. Voss's expression hardened slightly. We have our reasons, Admiral. The swarm aren't unknown to us. We've encountered similar species before. Expansionist, resource-driven, viewing other sentient life as either competition or fodder. Earth has a policy regarding such threats. And what policy is that? Asked Elder Vin, speaking for the first time since the humans' arrival. Commander Voss turned to the ancient Talaxian, her voice dropping to a tone that resonated with grim determination. Threat containment through decisive action, she stated. Or to put it in less diplomatic terms, hit them hard enough, fast enough, and thoroughly enough that they never consider expansion in our direction again. The silence that followed was broken only by the ambient hum of the ship's systems. You speak as though your species has been at war for its entire history, Krell observed quietly. Not its entire history, Voss corrected. Just most of it. She turned back to Admiral Zental. The coming days will be difficult. The swarm will retaliate, probably against civilian targets to demonstrate their displeasure. We need to prepare your people for that reality. Our civilians have no experience with warfare, Zental said, concern evident in his voice. Then they'll need to learn quickly, Voss replied, not unkindly but with unmistakable firmness. In the meantime, my tactical team has identified 5 swarm hive clusters within striking distance. If we hit them simultaneously, we can disrupt their command structure before they can reorganize. As Commander Voss outlined her plan, Admiral Zental found himself studying the human with new understanding. These were not simply skilled warriors. They had been shaped by conflict in ways the Alliance could barely comprehend. Their history, their biology, their very psychology had been forged in the crucible of struggle. The Alliance had achieved peace through technological advancement and diplomatic finesse. Humans, it seemed, had achieved something different. They had mastered war itself, turning it into a science as precise and developed as any Alliance discipline. As the joint planning session continued, Zental caught Elder Vin's eye across the room. The ancient Talaxian nodded slightly, a gesture that conveyed volumes. They had indeed invited predators into their midst, creatures of contradiction who could be both terrifyingly violent and fiercely protective. The question now was whether the Alliance, having forgotten the art of warfare, could remember how to direct such formidable allies without losing their own identity in the process. 3 weeks later, the Alliance Human Joint Forces stood ready for the most ambitious operation of the war. Thus far, Operation Thunderstrike, a coordinated assault on the swarm's primary hive cluster in the Cygnus Void. The arrival of the 107th Echo Battalion had transformed the nature of the conflict. Unlike conventional military forces, the Echo troops specialized in psychological warfare, asymmetric tactics, and neurological disruption, all tailored specifically to exploit the hive mind weaknesses of the swarm. Alliance scientists worked alongside human technicians to adapt their technologies. Quantum shields were recalibrated to emit chaotic pattern disruptions that confused swarm biological sensors. Communication arrays were modified to broadcast frequencies that triggered disorientation in the enemy's neural network, but most surprisingly, the human soldiers themselves proved to be the most effective weapon. "I don't understand," Krell confessed to Lieutenant Rivera as they observed Echo troops preparing for deployment. "Your weapons technology is inferior to ours in almost every measurable way. Your ships lack our advanced shielding. Your armor is primitive compared to our molecular bonded protection. Yet you're consistently more effective against the swarm." "How?" Rivera smiled. "You're looking at the wrong metrics, Director. Our true advantage isn't technological, it's psychological." "Explain." "The swarm operates as a collective intelligence, correct? A hive mind that processes information through consensus and pattern recognition." Krell nodded. "Yes, it's what makes them so formidable. Millions of individual units acting with perfect coordination. And therein lies their weakness," Rivera said. "They can't comprehend true individuality. Their evolutionary path never required it. They expect enemies to behave according to logical algorithms, just as they do." "And humans don't?" Rivera laughed. "Humans are walking chaos engines, Director. We're predictably unpredictable, even to ourselves. Our greatest military leaders throughout history often succeeded by doing exactly what their enemies considered too irrational to attempt." She gestured toward the Echo troops. "These soldiers are trained to maximize that unpredictability. Each operates with broad mission parameters but complete tactical freedom. No two will approach the same problem identically. The swarm can't adapt to what it can't predict." Operation Thunderstrike commenced at 0400 hours, Alliance Standard Time. The combined fleet engaged the swarm's outer defenses, while Echo Battalion deployed directly into the heart of the hive cluster using stealth drop pods, another human innovation that baffled Alliance engineers but proved remarkably effective. From the command center of the Eternal Vigilance, Admiral Zental watched in astonishment as the battle unfolded. The swarm, for the first time since the war began, appeared confused. Their formations, usually fluid and responsive, became erratic. Communication between their units degraded. Coordinated counterattacks failed to materialize. "What's happening?" he asked, turning to Commander Voss, who stood beside him monitoring the tactical display. "Cognitive overload," she replied without taking her eyes off the screen. "The Echo. Troops are executing Protocol Babel, each team implementing completely different tactical approaches simultaneously. The swarm's hive mind can't process the conflicting data fast enough to formulate an effective response. But your soldiers will be slaughtered without coordination," Mira protested. Voss shook her head. "That's where you're wrong. Each Echo team trains together for years. They don't need central coordination. They adapt to each other instinctively. It's what we call swarm intelligence, ironically enough. As the operation progressed, the effectiveness of the human approach became undeniable. Within 6 hours, the primary hive cluster, which Alliance strategists had estimated would require weeks to neutralize, was in disarray. Swarm ships began retreating in all directions, their previously impeccable coordination shattered. "They're running," Mira announced, her voice reflecting the disbelief felt throughout the command center. "Not just running," Voss corrected. "They're fragmenting. We've disrupted their neural network badly enough that subgroups are losing connection to the main consciousness. They're reverting to more primitive behaviors." "Is this victory?" Zental asked cautiously. "It's the beginning of one," Voss replied. "The swarm isn't defeated, but they're experiencing something they've never encountered before: existential confusion. For a hive mind, that's devastating." In the days that followed, Alliance scientists studied the battle data with growing fascination. The human approach to warfare, decentralized, adaptive, embracing chaos rather than trying to impose order, ran counter to every principle of Alliance military doctrine. Yet it had succeeded where their advanced technology had failed. 1 month after Operation Thunderstrike, the Alliance Council convened an extraordinary session. Admiral Zental and Commander Voss stood side by side before the assembled representatives of 112 worlds. High Counselor Vara, the eldest of the Talaxian delegation, addressed them first. "Admiral Zental, Commander Voss, the Alliance owes you and your forces a debt that cannot be measured. The swarm has withdrawn from 26 star systems. Their attacks have decreased by 78%. For the first time, we dare to hope for more than mere survival." She paused, her ancient eyes focusing on Voss. "Yet questions remain. Your species was unknown to us before this crisis. Your methods are alien to our understanding. What assurance do we have that once the swarm is defeated, Earth will not become the next threat to Alliance security?" A murmur passed through the assembly. The question had been on many minds, but rarely voiced aloud. Commander Voss stepped forward. For a moment, the command presence that had carried her through countless battles seemed to fade, revealing something more contemplative. "High Counselor, members of the Alliance, I understand your concerns. Humanity's history is written in blood as much as in ink. We've waged war against our environment, against other species, against ourselves. We've nearly destroyed our world more than once." She paused, looking around the chamber. "But each time we stepped back from the brink, we learned. We evolved not biologically, but culturally. We discovered that the same capacity for violence that threatens our existence also enables us to protect what we value most." Voss gestured toward Admiral Zental. "The Alliance represents everything humanity aspires to become: unified, peaceful, devoted to knowledge and creation rather than destruction. We fight so well because we've learned from our mistakes, not because we glorify them." She straightened, her voice gaining strength. "Earth doesn't seek territory, resources, or dominance. We seek partners, equals who understand that the galaxy is vast enough for all sentient life to flourish. The swarm threatens that vision. We oppose them not because we love war, but because we've seen its cost more intimately than most." The chamber fell silent as her words resonated. High Counselor Vara studied the human commander for several long moments before speaking again. "Commander Voss, your honesty is appreciated. The Alliance has always believed that diversity brings strength, different perspectives, different approaches, different solutions to common problems. Perhaps in our pursuit of harmony, we forgot that sometimes chaos has its purpose too." She turned to address the full council. "I propose a formal alliance with Earth, not merely for the duration of this conflict, but beyond it. Not because We fear them, but because we recognize what they can teach us about resilience, adaptation, and yes, the necessary role of controlled conflict in evolution. The vote was unanimous. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Zental found himself standing beside Commander Voss at a viewport overlooking Alliance Prime. The planet's rings cast a gentle light across its gleaming cities, symbols of Alliance achievement and stability. Now in orbit above, human vessels moved alongside Alliance ships, different in design, purpose, and philosophy, yet united in common cause. "Your people asked for warriors," Voss said quietly. "You got more than you bargained for." "Perhaps we received exactly what we needed," Zental replied. "Not just warriors, but a reminder of something we had forgotten in our long peace." "What's that?" His luminescence brightened as he turned to face her directly. "That survival sometimes requires adaptation. That civilization must occasionally remember how to fight for its existence. And that even in darkness, unexpected allies can bring new light." Above them, Echo Battalion troops began deploying into defensive positions around Alliance space, the vanguard of a new era where humanity's warriors stood watch over advanced civilizations. Their fierce instincts channeled toward protection rather than conquest, the galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the two species whose destinies had become intertwined in the crucible of existential threat. In the vast reaches of space, news of the swarm's defeat spread rapidly. Other powers, some curious, some cautious, some hostile, took note of the unexpected alliance between the peaceful Alliance and the newly emerged humans. The balance of power had shifted, and with it, the future of an entire sector of the galaxy. The swarm had celebrated too soon. They thought they faced a defeated enemy until humanity's shock troops entered the field.